A lot of players enjoy a challenge in the games they play. After all, it's an interactive medium unlike any other, and one of its main appeals is overcoming tricky levels, difficult bosses, and exhausting obstacles. In fact, many players love super hard games and Souls-like ones that really push the limits when it comes to hard difficulty. However, some games are literally impossible to beat, but not due to any traditional difficulty curves like in Dark Souls or Elden Ring, but rather because they are insanely challenging to control or full of game-breaking glitches and bad designs. I'm Josh, and welcome to HotFix Gaming. Today we're looking at 10 such video games that are impossible to beat. So, let's get started. 10. Myst. Myst is still to this day one of the most recognizable puzzle games ever. The game was initially released in 1993 and soon became the best-selling PC game of all time, up until 2006 when it was overtaken by The Sims. What made Myst different than any other popular point-and-click games at the time was its minimal dialogue, opting instead to trust that players would work out what they're supposed to do themselves. This was key to Myst's difficulty, as not only are the puzzles tricky enough to solve on their own, but working out where to find the puzzles and what order to complete them in is deceivingly challenging too. 9. Dr. Mario, the Game Boy version. Dr. Mario is a particularly unique entry on our list, mainly because it has no clear ending. To understand that, it's important to first talk about the existence of the arcade kill screen. When classic arcade titles like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong run long enough, they eventually get to a point where the system hits its processor limit. In the former's case, the cap is at 255 stages, and when the game tries to load level 256, it instead spawns a garbled mess of graphics. In a sense, this is the end of the game, since developers never expected gamers to play for so long. They didn't bother to program an actual ending, but fans tend to celebrate getting so far that the game can no longer run. Dr. Mario is a weird example though, for a few reasons. First of all, the credits do play after beating level 20, but then following this, the game continues, which is unique. However, there is no graphical mess to celebrate when the game finally stops at level 28. The viruses to clear spawn, but Dr. Mario himself is suddenly missing. Where did he go? It's a bit of a worrying anticlimax and not much of an ending. 8. Friday the 13th. In 1989, the insanely popular horror film franchise got transformed into a tense, challenging game with the same name. In this game, players control a group of camp counselors who must search Crystal Lake for Jason Voorhees and defeat him 3 times. In theory, this makes for an interesting game. In practice, it doesn't work so well. This game is notoriously difficult, as Jason pops up every once in a while to attack one of the other counselors, requiring players to drop everything to save them. Besides Jason, the game throws plenty of obstacles like zombies and Jason's mother as a disembodied head, adding to the frustrating gameplay. Number 7. RoboCop Commodore 64. The 1989 RoboCop multi-format release was immensely popular. In fact, somehow it became the best-selling video game in the United Kingdom of the entire decade. So, gamers who grew up in the 80s remember this title with fondness, unless they had the Commodore 64 version. In this version, level 3 is literally impossible to beat, thanks to the time limit. Our steel-clad police officer simply doesn't move quickly enough to reach the goal. This was imposed by the developers at Ocean for a very specific reason: to hide the truth. See, it is possible to get through level 3 by repeatedly crouching next to a specific wall and pushing yourself through. On the other side, level 4 begins, which is a mess of tiles and sprites, completely unfinished and unplayable. Now it makes sense why the time limit was so strict. This is the worst example of a studio putting a band-aid over a broken bone. RoboCop was broken for the Commodore 64, and instead of trying to fix it before its release, they just decided to make it incredibly difficult so that people would give up. Number 6. King's Quest. Back in the 90s, when King's Quest was released, the internet wasn't really a thing. So players couldn't look up the answers online to difficult game levels and puzzles, and that is why many people have simply given up on trying to beat this game. The most infamous puzzle in King's Quest seems simple. All you have to do is guess Rumpelstiltskin's true name by typing it on your keyboard. First guess, it's Rumpelstiltskin spelled backwards. That's actually the correct answer, and the answer future re-releases patched in. But if you were playing the original game, the name you have to input is, well, we're not even going to try and spell that, but you can see it on the screen. Quite the mouthful, right? That's Rumpelstiltskin spelt backwards in the inverted alphabet. A equals Z, B equals Y, etc. There are no clues in-game to help you figure out you're meant to use an insane cipher. You just had to know. And also, Rumpelstiltskin's name is spelt wrong in King's Quest. In-game, his name is spelt Rumpelstiltskin. So, even if you figured out the key, you'd still get the puzzle wrong. And if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to hit that like button and share it with your gaming friends. Number 5. Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness. The final Tomb Raider game before the series' first reboot and shift of developers, Tomb Raider The Angel of Darkness, is not remembered as an auspicious end to the original series. Players continue the story of Lara Croft in this game, as she journeys across Paris and Prague, solving mysteries and exploring ruins. The Angel of Darkness expands the gameplay of the series to include elements like stealth and a stamina meter. However, these changes brought with them frustrating controls and intrusive glitches, which makes the game much harder than it is intended to be, making it a pain to beat for most. Number 4. Bubsy 3D. Even though the Bubsy series isn't one of the most well-remembered platforming series in gaming history, its fourth installment had made history as one of the earliest 3D games in the genre. But the problem with being one of the first to do something is that you're quite likely to fail. So nowadays, Bubsy 3D is widely regarded as a failure that is more known for its challenging controls and high difficulty rather than its pioneering nature. The visuals are incredibly difficult to read, which makes platforming challenging. However, the real issue here is with the controls. The game has players control Bubsy based on the direction he's facing rather than based on the orientation of the game, which makes movement a challenge. This, combined with Bubsy's slow movement, makes the game a nightmare to play, let alone beat. Number 3. Tokyo Extreme Racer 3, PlayStation 2. There are some games that cannot be completed due to the version players have purchased. Tokyo Extreme Racer 3 is a prime example of this. In the Japanese version of the game, players can reach a maximum CR score of 100 million, which is needed in order to unlock the race against a driver called Whirlwind Fanfare. But the North American version of the game has a CR cap, and players could only reach 99,999,990 CR score, which means that they could not unlock the final race, making the game impossible to beat. Number 2. Ninja Gaiden 2. Challenge was always part of the Ninja Gaiden series, but 2008's Ninja Gaiden 2 hit a new peak of demanding insanity. These enemies roughhouse the player on even normal difficulty, but once the setting is at Master Ninja, they attack relentlessly with brutal health-chewing grabs and projectiles. In later levels, enemies even have cannons for arms that can fire with impeccable precision and regularity. It's impossible to survive at times, never mind kill anything. Number 1. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, MS-DOS. The NES version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was infamous for its jump in the Seward stage that was incredibly difficult to achieve. Each time a player would fail at that jump, they would fall into the water and lose a life. However, despite the difficulty of the game, it still became one of the most popular titles on the system, mainly due to how big the turtles were at the time. But the DOS version of the game is far worse. The sewer level's design was altered so that the infamous jump was literally impossible. The reason for it was that the developers who were in charge of the port had moved the platform too far to the right, making it so that players could only progress with the help of cheats. What other impossible games do you remember? Let us know your toughest and most challenging titles in the comments below. And if you want more gaming content, make sure to check out our top 10 trophies and achievements that stopped you from completing a game, or the 10 innovative mechanics that are underused in gaming. Both videos are linked on screen.